Everybody ready? Sound check. 12, Mid-Michigan, 5, Action 7. We're good? My name is Chris Swanson, Sheriff of Genesee County. Ready? Wait. My name is Sheriff Chris Swanson, Sheriff of Genesee County here in Flint, Michigan. What you're going to hear is an investigation that has spanned over several decades. We were just brought in February 24th this year. When I say investigation, this is a culmination of many, many people that have noticed things that were unusual, things that were not correct, things that were odd, all coming together. Reference one individual, and that is Eugene Stephen Pratt, 57-year-old out of Davison, Michigan. I'm going to tell you the story. I'm going to tell you how we got to where we are over all these years. And I'm also going to tell you that we have identified at least 15 victims. Eugene Pratt, in his own resume, states as a career objective to obtain a position as elementary, middle school, and high school principal, to acquire a supervisory position in athletic administration. Eugene Pratt, in his time of serving in the education world, stated his elementary experience involved sunrise teaching at-risk students at Dowdell Elementary. His middle school experience has chaperoned all school dances, coached 5 years for junior high swimming, diving, and 2 years for the track team. His contributions in the high school involved coaching 7 years for varsity swimming and diving and being a statistician for 14 years on the varsity football team. I think it's key that individuals that put themselves in supervisory positions, they do that if they're a predator to have access to prey. And when you look at Eugene Pratt's career development, and you see where he started in 1986 and went from substitute and student teaching all the way up to Dean of Students at Hamtramck Community Schools. When you see positions that he held that involved being a principal, school administrator, counselor, GED coordinator, and even after he taught, where he was arrested last week out of New Paths as a driver, as a transport officer, people that are assigned in order to go to New Paths by court order. That's what happens is individuals like Eugene Pratt put themselves in positions of authority over others in order to act out their prey and to find and identify vulnerable people. Now, the word vulnerable includes, in this case, inner city students, poor students, students that have been kicked out of high school, students that are trying to get their GED, adult education. Without going into all the details of the case, because that'll be during the court process as we roll this out and he's represented and we do what we do best. All those details will roll out, but as you accelerated in those positions, and we're going to name those schools and those districts, you're going to see that as he found students, there was a protocol that he had up until he was discharged from some of these locations to when he just left because he would be noticed. In fact, there are 3 civil lawsuits that didn't even reach to the level of lawsuits. They were called facilitation agreements. 2 of the 3 represented by attorney Glenn Lenhoff right here in Grand Blanc. They were settled in 2014 and 2015. There were 3 total. Of those 3, we are talking almost 10 years ago. They do not rise to the level of a criminal investigation. Make it very clear that school districts or churches or police departments or any other organization that involves people overseeing other people, a civil settlement does not excuse criminal accountability. And that's what we saw. When we were brought this case, Captain Jason Murphy and Lieutenant Dave Kennemer, part of our ghost team investigators, worked every day, and we thought of it every day as, how do we hold accountable somebody who has been able to escape the accountability of investigators for so many years? Somebody who has a name in this community, somebody that has a family, and our heart breaks for his family, those that had no idea, that share the same last name. When you see this and you see all the different cases that we have and all the different victims, many of the victims, we don't even know their names. We just know that there are more victims. This is the kind of individual that does it under these circumstances, because many times, and we're going to see in this case, you have school districts and different organizations that want things to go away instead of being held accountable. Well, this is the day that he's held accountable. Eugene Pratt was arrested yesterday. He was charged with criminal sexual conduct, 1 count, first degree, which is a life offense. I was asked by some individuals in the room today, why just 1 count? If we look at history throughout this state and this country, cases like Larry Nassar and the Catholic Church and Jerry Sandusky and Jeffrey Epstein, and you look at these big cases, they start with one courageous victim who comes forward and wants to tell their story. And that's exactly what happened here. An adult male victim came forward and said, I need to tell my story. And we were able to work with Mr. Lenhoff, and we were able to bring that victim in and give them a voice. Give them something to grab onto to say, you're going to be protected, and we are going to hold Eugene Pratt accountable. That was nearly 3 months ago. Eugene Pratt was arraigned this morning on that CSC. He was given a bond. He's still in custody today. But this is why you're here. From 1986 to where we are right now, this is the chronological pattern and places that he went to throughout his school history. Beecher Community Schools, Milton E. Tucker Middle School, 5159 Summit Street, September 1986 to May 1987, he was a student teacher. Eugene Pratt graduated from Powers High School. He got his bachelor's degree from Michigan State and his master's degree, his bachelor's from Michigan and his master's degree from Michigan State. Immediately into his student teaching, notice the date, 1986. These places that he went to were calling out to people that may have been victimized. Whether they have or haven't, we're going through the whole list. So you can have conversations with people. We don't know when it started, but we do know that it continued over decades. And as I said, multiple victims, we are going to give you your voice. We have already received multiple tips based on the breaking news of our media friends out here, of people that want us to look into this and look into that. We're going to, but I want to timestamp where he was and what he did at these locations. He went from being a student teacher to a substitute teacher. Kearsley Community Schools, Hammoney Community Schools, Grand Blanc Community Schools from May 1997 to June 1990. 3 years as a substitute teacher. Bouncing from one school to the next. We don't have an idea as to how many times he taught at one school or another, but we do know during this time period, that's where he was. If you have somebody that's been in the school during this time, they were in part of swimming or diving or football, take note, talk. Give somebody an opportunity to share their story should it happen. Kearsley Community Schools, Armstrong Middle School, 6161 Hopkins Road, Flint. From August 1990 for 5 years to June 95, he was a 6th grade teacher. Kearsley School District, Dowdle Elementary School, 3333 Shillelagh Drive, Flint 48506, August 95 to June 1999. Another 4-year stint. Now he's a 5th grade teacher. He worked at the Davison Athletic Club, right in Davison, 2140 Fairway Drive, right there, Fairway Drive off M15. He was there from 1999 to 2005, 6 years as a guest services manager. Took care of staff, took care of people that came to the athletic club. From there, he went to Hammoney Middle School and High School, 3223 West Carpenter Road, Flint. From October 2004 to June 2005, he was a career resource director. sat down with people trying to lay out where their career might be, where it might take them. These are individuals that had no direction many times. As I said, as we get into the court proceedings, you'll see the type of victims and predators and prey scenario that we had. But I assure you this, these are individuals that are not always from his community, that are in other communities that have been taken advantage of because of a need that they have. Beecher Community Schools, Beecher Adult Education, 1020 West Coldwater, October 2006 to June 2013. Principal of Beecher Adult Education and Alternative Education. Here's a very interesting factor in this time period. While he was there as the principal, and people came to Beecher Adult Ed to get their lives back, to get jobs, to get GEDs and diplomas. Maybe they were kicked out of another school district and they needed to get their life back on. There was a procedure that took place that we saw in our investigation that took literally minutes to go from introduction to sex act requests by a principal of education. And I will tell you that Beecher Community Schools did not renew his contract after 2013. But 3 victims came forward. And there's other media outlets that have actually seen and published facilitation agreements between the 3 victims. 2 of the settlements were under $100,000, and one of the settlements was $165,000. These are agreements between family and schools and insurance companies and, of course, civil attorneys. That's what they do. They're civil attorneys. They settle disputes. I think it's important to know that this is what tipped the scale for us. So we're very thankful for the Beecher Community Schools. We're very thankful for those that got us to where we needed to get to. But it didn't stop there. He went right from Beecher after 2013 to Kniff Liberty Academy, which is in Hamtramck Community Schools in Wayne County. October 2013 to June 2015, he was the Dean of Students. It goes back to his resume. He wants a supervisory position, a position of authority. We've seen it countless times throughout our investigations, not only in this case, but in other cases, where people put themselves in those positions in order to try to teach, mentor, guide, but all the while, these predators have an ulterior motive. And the reason why we're doing this so methodically is because we need the power of the media and the public to define, to give freedom and liberty to victims that we know exist out there. We had one brave, courageous victim come forward. And as I said, we know that there's 15. We have others that have waited to see if they was even going to happen, because they want to see if this is just another attempt to see if he was going to be held accountable. That's why we do this today after he was formally charged by Prosecutor David Layton under the expertise of Assistant Prosecuting Attorney Tammy Phillips, working hand in hand with Captain Murphy and Lieutenant Kennemer, writing search warrant after search warrant after search warrant. We have to follow the law to get probable cause to do what we need to do to build a case, to take it to the prosecutor and say we now have enough. Because others have tried in the past, but nobody has gotten to where we are right now. Ghost did. He was arrested at New Paths, 765 East Hamilton Avenue. New Paths is a court-ordered addiction center. That's a whole new level of control. These are individuals that have the lifetime, many times, fight on their life. They're trying to renew themselves. They've been ordered to go there. And you have somebody with this history as a security and transportation officer, one-on-one transports, June 2021 to when he was arrested last week. We have notified New Paths that he was formally charged today. Major Bill Lanning took care of that. How they handle it is on them. That is none of my concern when it comes to this case as the sheriff. Our concern and our mission is to give victims their voice and hold Eugene Pratt accountable is what we're doing. We know those victims that are out there watching right now. And we know there's a lot of conversations happening in the Kearsley School District, Davidson School District, Beecher School District, Hamtramck School District. We know there's conversations going in Grand Blanc. When you look at the family name of Pratt, I understand the pain of people who had no idea. But the message I give you now, number one, victims come forth, we will protect you. We have a 24/7 hotline set up through 810-257-3422. You can call 911. We have ghost investigators that are on call. If you have a moment where you have built up enough courage and faith and trust in us. At 3 in the morning, you call this number, we will dispatch a detective right there. We're not waiting in the morning. We're not waiting for the next business day. We want to protect you. If that's not something you want to do, you can contact the YMCA at this number. They will get to us. We know these are very, very difficult circumstances. We know that there's victims that did not want to come forward because they were, number one, scared, and they didn't want people to find out. The shame and the pressure that has been overwhelming has taken a great toll on families, including families in this room. But my goal, and the goal of Ghost Investigators, to give you that assurance that when people do wrong, no matter how long it takes, they will be held accountable. But there's other people out there like Eugene Pratt, because we've asked this before. Dave Custer from Channel 5 says, why does this keep happening? So we're not naive to think there's other individuals out there in the schools and other organizations that have done this type, and maybe it's never been reported. There's been a civil settlement. Let me assure you this, those days are over. Anybody who's in a position of authority over others, in any position, when you see something that you know is not right, not only do you have a mandatory duty to report, but you have a moral duty to report. That includes law enforcement. We've seen that through the 2020 George Floyd murder, that they had a duty to act. So I ask you no different of anything I ask myself, and that is, you may not have somebody named Eugene Pratt, but there's been somebody else. And you may have thought, that was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. There's no statute of limitation on criminal sexual conduct, first degree, none. If there's something that you have moved on and you feel the burden because of this and the media and the pressure and the guilt that keeps you up at night, you come forward. Maybe you want, we'll take the burden, law enforcement will. We have friends all over the state. So this isn't just a message to the victims to encourage them, but it's also the people that are out there that have positions of authority. We need to do the right thing when no one's looking. We need to do the right thing to help people put their lives back together. And that's the message we're sending home. Eugene Pratt's been held accountable. We know there's more victims. We need you to trust us. We're asking the media and those watching to spread this message, to have conversations, and if it's not his name and face, if it's somebody else in another state, we have a large audience. Take the courageous step and help somebody. Give a victim their voice. That's the message. I'm going to open it up to questions on those that I can answer. Questions?
Why were you just brought in February?
So the question from Mid-Michigan is, why were we just brought in February? And many times there have been other people that this case has been given to that, again, timing and opportunity and resources just didn't make it happen. But I will tell you, there is a family that never gave up. They never gave up. Their gut told them that something wasn't right, and they kept going. I wish I would have had it years ago, Courtney, but when I was given the anonymous text tip to get a hold of this family, that family opened the door for us to do what Ghost does best and get us to where we are right now. That family that brought it forth is not the family of the victim that he's been charged with. But many times it just takes one simple act with everything falling in place, and that's how we got to where we are today.
What age group are we looking at here?
Ronnie, ABC 12, I like to give credit where credit is due. The age that we see right now is young teens to, and these are people under his control. Because these victims were not under 16, they're not under 15. The ones that we have are adult age, but they're under control in adult education scenarios. You could have people that are in their young 20s, but they're in their GED, their diploma program, their life's depending on it. The way the law is written is if it's somebody under the authority of another, that plays a significant variable. But to your question, those that are victims, we believe they're all young teens to older teens, even to the young 20s, that we're all in that adult education, perhaps trying to get their life back together, but we are not going to dismiss the possibility that it could have happened in another area, in another school, because many times these predators, they build up courage and they groom people, and it takes years, and what happens, it just turns into this vicious cycle, and they get to where they are so bold that within, as I said, minutes, they're already asking about sex acts in order to get something in return.
Do you believe all the victims are male?
I believe all the victims are male. Our investigation shows nothing on the contrary.
Sheriff, you mentioned 3 civil lawsuits out of Beecher. Did they ever report anything to the Sheriff's Department or investigators for there to be criminal charges?
So David Custer from WNEM was the 3 civil actions. Now again, they weren't filed lawsuits. I want to make it clear. They were civil actions called facilitation agreements at different levels. 2 with Mr. Lenhoff, 1 with an attorney in Saginaw. I know that Montmore's Township Police Department, then Chief Terrence Green, started an investigation, but again, timing and resources, it did not lead to any charges. I will tell you, this was the very first time this office was ever given this case, February 24th, 2022, which started the track that we're on now. I just called Chief of the Flint Police Department, Green, last night to let him know what the status is. He was very thankful. He wanted this as bad as anybody else, because if there's one thing I think those in this room that deal with investigative reporting or law enforcement, when your gut's telling you something's not right, your gut is usually right. And he was thankful that Eugene Pratt is being held accountable.
So were there any previous criminal cases that were opened against this guy that you're aware of?
Any previous criminal cases opened? I believe Montmore's Township opened through a complaint number, but that's the first step, and nothing came of it. It was never presented to the prosecutor's office as a formal warrant request until we presented it to APA Tammy Phillips, which got us to where we are right now. But I'm not also dismissing that there's a school district or an unknown in Oakland or Wayne County, Macomb County, that Eugene Pratt was there as a coach, was there as a statistician, was there as a diving instructor, whatever it may be. They put themselves in positions to do that. So if that name or face rings a bell, then act on it, because I don't know the answer, and I'd be remiss to say that this is the only one.
Sheriff, as we learned from the Larry Nassar case and the fallout, is it possible that some people in these school districts could face charges for not reporting these events?
So the question is, those in the school districts, if they had knowledge and didn't report it, could they face charges? And the answer is yes. Because we have a duty to report, but not only criminal. If there was an active, overt act to suppress it for the fear of a reputation tarnish or some other reason, then that is part of our investigation. We don't believe that happened in Beecher. He was long gone. And when we interviewed the superintendent, who's no longer there, he was very forthright and laid out exactly what happened. But I'm not convinced that there may have been other people that knew something that could have happened but didn't report it. And there again, we use this public platform that we have, that if that happens, or if there's a retired administrator that knew something should have been done that didn't, please come forward. We will protect you, we will hear you, and we will investigate. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but if it did happen, we will hold them accountable.
You said you don't believe it happened in Beecher. Do you believe it happened in Kersley?
I don't know the answer to that about Kersley, and here's why. We have 3 facilitation agreements that are on record for Beecher Community Schools. We have nothing at the Kersley School District. We have a lot of people who have ideas and have thoughts in law enforcement, and the prosecutor's office has to operate on facts. And so we are seeking any kind of evidence, seeking any kind of memoir or email that could lead us to something that we could go on, regardless if it's a district listed there or any other district. If we find that there was information withheld, and we saw that in the case that you mentioned, in order to protect the reputation of a district, it's not the district that hurts, it's the people of that district. And people that are there serving as administrators owe it to the people to represent them well. So wherever our path will take us, the prosecutor and I are walking shoulder to shoulder to hold people accountable should it happen.
Is he cooperating?
Is Eugene Pratt cooperating? He was arrested and made no statements yesterday when he was arrested. But cooperating is part of our investigation, but I will tell you, with a lot of different tools of investigation we were able to use in order to get probable cause to get a warrant with the information we have. He was not resistant.
How so? what was the reaction from his family?
Devastated.
Married with kids.
Yes, the question is the family, and myself and Captain Murphy met with the immediate family last week, and devastated. Devastated.
Do you plan on searching his computers and I don't know if you already searched his home, but is that something that you plan to do?
So the question is searching his home and other areas. The answer is yes. We've already searched his home. We have search warrants that have already been prepared. We've already had his his phone forensically examined. We're in the process of that. We have his car in custody, and we have a search warrant for that. We have not found anything at the house that would lend us to believe that there's an area that was a secret area. We believe everything was within him and on his person. So as this progresses, there could be storage units, there could be other things that we're going to follow up leads on, and that's part of this active case.
Do you believe the family knew anything?
I don't know the answer to that question, if the family knew or not.
Can you confirm that one of his possible victims committed suicide?
I can't confirm that, but I can tell you that there was a young man in 1999 that took his own life. But this case that he's charged with is not for that potential victim. But the family's well aware of the process, and we're very thankful they stayed with it. Mr. Kirchner?
Can we take the questions on the phone?
Yes, sir.
Can you, you mentioned there might be as many as 15 victims. Where do you come up with that number, and where might they be located?
So the question from Jim Kirchner, Action 7 investigator, I mentioned 15 victims. We know that one of them is a victim in this case. We also know that 4 others came from the school district that we just mentioned. We know that 3 of those 5 had facilitation agreements, but not all of them are in the same mindset and life position to come forward as our victim number 1 did. That's 5. The other 10 were part of our continuing investigation that I had mentioned some key phrases and actions that we've taken that we believe and strongly believe that there are 10 additional students that were under his command that we don't know names and faces, which those 2 added bring us to the 15. But these cases, whether we get them or not, you know, Dave Custer mentioned the Larry Nassar case. There was a tremendous amount of victims that came forward. But I probably would agree that being in this business for as long as we are, there's victims that didn't come forward. They want to try to deal with it. And that's the pain of and the silence of the evening. So 15 is where we're at. It could be more.
Another question from the phone. Can you talk about your case that has been charged and he has been arraigned goes back to 2013. That's 9 years ago. Without just divulging the whole case, what evidence do you have that you're able to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, just beyond what your victim might say and what your suspect might say?
So the question is, based on the case we have right now, what evidence, if I could share, do we have that 9 years later, do we have enough to charge a life offense between 2 individuals? And I will tell you that many of these cases, even in addition to this case, those statements are so critical, there isn't physical evidence. You're not going to find a DNA kit or a video. But there is enough in those statements, as well as other things that corroborate those statements, that meet the variables to charge for criminal sexual conduct 1st degree.
Could you expand on that a little bit? Are you talking MO, or what exactly do you mean?
So I can't expand on all the elements that we have and the probable cause we have to write the warrant, because that's part of the case. He has, to my knowledge, not been formally represented. Whatever defense attorney that is representing Eugene Pratt will have that discovery. But I will tell you, yes, that's why these cases are so tedious. You're talking a 9-year gap You're talking people that are now adults and they've moved on in their life. But when this case rolls out, you'll see that small little pieces that affirm a story are used as variables to allow the prosecutor to write charges. When you have statements made, when you have victims that make a consistent statement, when you have facilitation agreements that back up statements, all those elements allow us the opportunity to write a warrant such as criminal sexual conduct in the first degree. Not every case has those, not every victim has those, but we are confident that the charge that we have with Eugene Pratt is very solid.
Did any of those agreements have non-disclosure, agreements in place?
So the question about non-disclosure agreements, the answer is yes, to my knowledge. We have been working with the civil attorneys that have files, and Attorney Glenn Lenhoff has been very cooperative and has been very forthright on coming and giving what he has and what he has had done to help us with this investigation. To him, I'm very thankful.
Do you think the bond is too low, set at $25,000?
I think the family would agree to that. Any final questions? Well, thank you very much. I'm sure there's some additional information that'll come as time permits. Thank you, everybody, for sharing, and please have conversations about what we talked about. Good day.